The stagecoach groaned to a stop, and Evelyn Moore felt her breath lock in her chest. In her lap lay a folded letter, creased, reread, never meant for her. In 48 hours, she would stand before a man who had promised his future to another woman, a man who had never asked for her. She stared at the dust on her boots and made herself a quiet promise. She would tell him the truth the moment she arrived, even if it sent her straight back east, even if it cost her the only escape she had ever known. The morning her life shattered began before sunrise in a cramped farmhouse in eastern Kansas, thick with the smell of cold ash and resentment. Evelyn stood at the bottom of the stairs as her father's voice thundered through the house. She's gone. She didn't need to see the empty bed upstairs to know who she was. Lillian, her younger sister, beautiful, restless, always looking westward in her dreams and eastward in her desires. Her father's boots paced the kitchen floor like a ticking clock. The contract lay crushed in his fist. "Read it," he ordered. Evelyn unfolded the note with numb fingers. Lillian's handwriting looped across the page, soft, confident, careless. "I can't bury myself on some lonely ranch. I won't watch my life disappear into dirt and silence. Thomas is taking me to Chicago. Please forgive me." Her mother's quiet sob broke the room open. "There's 4 days," her father said at last. 4 days until Jonah Reed expects a bride in Red Willow Valley. Evelyn felt the words before she understood them. "You'll go instead." The sentence landed like a verdict. Her mother tried to protest. Her father didn't listen. The money was already spent. The seed bought. The farm barely breathing. "He asked for Lillian," Evelyn said softly. "He's never seen me." "He asked for a wife," her father snapped. "Someone strong. Someone useful." Useful. That word had followed Evelyn her entire life. That afternoon she packed Lillian's trunk, embroidered linens, a fine wool coat, a Bible with another woman's name pressed into the leather. Nothing in it belonged to her. That night she read Jonah Reed's and letters for the first time. They weren't romantic. They were honest, stark, careful. "I won't promise ease," he'd written, "but I will promise respect." By dawn, Evelyn Moore boarded a westbound coach with borrowed belongings and a borrowed future. Ahead of her waited a man who expected someone else, and she was running out of time to decide whether courage would save her or ruin her completely. The coach rattled west for 3 punishing days. Evelyn learned the sound of bones knocking against wood, the smell of sweat and leather, the way time stretched when fear had nowhere to go. She spoke little. She watched the land change instead. Fields thinning into prairie, prairie rising into broken country. The sky growing so wide it made her feel small and exposed. At night she dreamed of a man's eyes she had never seen. Eyes that would take one look at her and know she was not the woman he'd chosen. On the 4th afternoon, the driver called out on Red Willow Valley. The town appeared suddenly. A scatter of buildings pressed against the earth as if bracing for wind. A store, a saloon, a small church. Beyond it all, ranchland stretched toward distant hills, quiet and unforgiving. Evelyn's legs shook as she stepped down from the coach. "Miss Moore?" She turned to see a woman approaching, mid-50s, sturdy, kind-eyed, hair pinned back without vanity. "I'm Mrs. Eliza Grant," the woman said gently. "I was asked to meet you." Evelyn swallowed. "You were expecting my sister." Mrs. Grant hesitated. Just a breath. Long enough to tell the truth. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm not her," Evelyn said quietly. "And I need to tell him that myself." Mrs. Grant studied her, then nodded once. "He's waiting at my house. Thought it best to keep the town out of it." They walked in silence. Every step felt like walking toward judgment. The house was neat and modest. Warm. Safe in a way. Evelyn had nearly forgotten existed. Mrs. Grant opened the door and called out, "Jonah, she's here." Footsteps sounded, slow, measured. Then he stood in the doorway. Jonah Reed was taller than the photograph had suggested, broad-shouldered, weathered. His hair was dark with silver already, touching the edges. His face shaped by sun and labor rather than softness, but it was his eyes that stopped Evelyn's breath. They were calm, watchful, not unkind. They took her in, and something shifted. "Mr. Reed," she said before anyone else could speak, "my name is Evelyn Moore. I owe you the truth." The room went very still. Mrs. Grant moved to speak, but Jonah raised a hand, not sharply, just enough to pause her. "I want to hear it," he said. Evelyn straightened her spine. Her hands trembled, but she didn't hide them. My sister ran away. She chose another life. I was sent in her place to keep the contract from breaking. Silence stretched, heavy, testing. Jonah didn't shout. He didn't turn away. He only asked one question. "And you?" he said quietly. "Did you choose to come?" Evelyn met his eyes, knowing the answer would decide everything. Evelyn held his gaze, her heart pounding so hard she feared he might hear it. "I didn't choose the way it happened," she said carefully. "But I chose to come. I told my father I would not lie to you. If you send me back, I'll go without complaint." Jonah studied her in silence. Not the way men in town had once looked at her, measuring, dismissive, but as if he were listening with his eyes. Mrs. Grant cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should sit—" "No," Jonah said, still watching Evelyn. "Let her finish." Evelyn drew a slow breath. "I'm not what you expected. I know that. I'm not delicate. I've worked a farm since I was a girl. I can cook, keep accounts, tend animals, and work from dawn until dark. I won't pretend to be anyone else." The words left her hollow and exposed. Jonah turned away, crossing to the window. Outside, dust rolled low across the road. A dog barked somewhere in town. Ordinary sounds stretched thin by waiting. "You know I could refuse," he said at last. "The agreement was made with your sister." "Yes." "And you'd go back east with nothing but the shame of it." "Yes." He turned back to her then, and his voice had changed, not softer but deeper. More careful. "I didn't send for a wife to decorate my house," Jonah said. "I sent for a partner. Someone who could stand beside me when things go wrong. And they go wrong out here more often than not." Evelyn said nothing. She barely breathed. "I won't decide today," he continued. "You've traveled too far. You're exhausted. I won't bind either of us to something we don't understand yet." Her knees almost gave out in relief. "What are you saying?" she asked. "A trial," Jonah said. 2 weeks. You can stay at the ranch. See the work. See the land. I'll see if what you say about yourself is true." Mrs. Grant frowned. "Jonah, people will talk." "They always do." Jonah looked back at Evelyn. "If at the end of 2 weeks you want to leave, I'll pay your passage and enough to start over. If I decide it won't work, I'll do the same." "And if we both agree?" Evelyn asked. "Then we marry," he said simply. "Properly. With witnesses." The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer. "I'd like to stay at the ranch," Evelyn said before she could doubt herself. Jonah's brow lifted slightly. "You understand that means work. Real work." "I didn't come west to be protected," she said. "I came to be useful." Something like approval flickered across his face. "Then we leave before sunset," Jonah said. "It's a long ride." As they stepped outside, Evelyn glanced back once at the quiet house in town. She didn't know if she was walking toward acceptance or rejection, only that for the first time in her life, someone was giving her the chance to prove who she truly was. The wagon ride out of Red Willow Valley was quiet, broken only by the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of hooves. Evelyn sat straight-backed on the seat, hands folded in her lap, taking in the land that unfolded before her, rolling grass, low ridges, a sky that felt too wide to belong to anyone. Jonah drove without hurry. He didn't speak much, but his silence wasn't sharp. It felt deliberate, like a man who measured words the same way he measured land and weather. "You can ask questions," he said at last. Evelyn hesitated. "How far?" "Just under 2 hours." She nodded. "How many men work for you?" "2, good ones." "And your expectations?" she asked quietly. Jonah glanced at her then, not long but long enough to let the question settle. "I expect honesty, effort, and the sense to say when something's beyond you." That last part surprised her. The ranch appeared gradually, not grand but solid. A log house set against a rise. A barn in good repair. Fences that stood straight because someone cared enough to mend them. Cattle grazed in the distance. Dark shapes moving slowly across gold grass. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear, recognition. "This is home," Jonah said, not proudly but simply. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady, careful. For a brief moment, they stood close enough for her to smell soap and leather and wind on his coat. The house was clean and spare. A wide table, a stone hearth, a kitchen built for function, not show. He opened a door near the back. "That room's yours." It was small. A narrow bed. A single window. But it was private, her own. "I'll want supper before dark," Jonah said. But you don't owe me anything today. You've traveled enough. I'd like to cook, Evelyn replied. If that's all right. He studied her, then nodded. We eat simple. I do simple well. That earned her the faintest curve of his mouth. The men returned as she worked. Ausrisis and Luke both sun-worn and quiet. They nodded politely, watching her without comment as she served beans, bread, and salt pork. No one complained. No one spoke much. After supper, Jonah watched as Evelyn washed dishes without being asked. Her movements practiced and efficient. You don't slow down much, he observed. Habit, she said. Slowing down was a luxury we couldn't afford. Night settled over the ranch. The quiet deeper than anything she'd known. Wind and grass, a distant lowing of cattle, stars sharp and close. In her small room, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling. 2 weeks. 14 days to prove she was more than a replacement. Outside, a door closed softly. Footsteps crossed the yard. And for the first time since leaving home, Evelyn wondered if this place might see her. Or break her completely. Evelyn woke before dawn to the sound of movement in the kitchen. Not voices. Just the scrape of a chair, the soft clink of a kettle. She dressed quickly in the sturdy skirt. Mrs. Grant had lent her and braided her hair tight. When she stepped into the main room, Jonah was already pouring coffee. You're early, he said. I'm used to it. He handed her a cup without ceremony. Can you ride astride? Yes. Good, side saddles don't last long out here. They ate standing, bread, eggs, salt pork. Simple fuel for a long day. When Ben and Luke appeared surprised to find breakfast ready, Jonah only said, Evelyn's riding with us. No one argued. Outside, the morning air was sharp and clean. Jonah let out a bay mare with steady eyes. Her name's Willow, he said. She won't spook easy. Treat her fair and she'll do the same. Evelyn ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the warmth and muscle beneath the coat. She saddled without fumbling, tightened the cinch properly, adjusted the stirrups. Jonah watched, said nothing. They rode out as the sun crept over the hills, pushing cattle toward higher pasture. It was slow work, patient work. Every movement mattered. When a young steer tried to break away, Evelyn turned Willow smoothly, cutting him off before Jonah could react. Good, Jonah called. The word landed harder than praise ever had before. Hours passed. Dust coated her boots. Her thighs burned from the saddle. But she didn't ask to stop. Didn't complain when her hands blistered. She focused on the rhythm, watching, adjusting, anticipating. Near midday, they dismounted by a creek. Jonah handed her a canteen. You holding up? Yes. You're limping. I'll walk it off. He studied her, then nodded. We're halfway. They checked a cow with a stone lodged in her hoof. Jonah worked the pick while Evelyn held steady, speaking low until the animal calmed. Most people panic the first time, he said. I've learned panic wastes time. They returned to the saddle and finished the drive by late afternoon. When the cattle spread across fresh grass, Jonah looked satisfied. On the ride back, he pulled alongside her. You worked like you meant to be here. Evelyn swallowed. I do. At the barn, Jonah helped her down when her legs nearly gave way. His hands lingered only long enough to steady her. Go rest, he said. You earned it. Inside the house, Evelyn washed and started supper anyway. When the men returned to a hot meal, something changed in the room. Not words, not smiles. Respect. That night, as Evelyn lay aching but awake, she realized something quietly dangerous. She wasn't just surviving the trial. She was beginning to belong. The next morning brought a different kind of work. Branding day. Evelyn smelled it before she saw it. The sharp bite of smoke. Hot iron and restless cattle. Jonah moved with calm authority, giving instructions in short, clear bursts. Ben and Luke worked the pens with practiced ease. Jonah turned to Evelyn. You'll keep count. Write down markings. Stay by the fence. I understand. She took the ledger and pencil, positioning herself where she could see everything without being in the way. The first calf was roped, wrestled down, and branded in seconds. The smell turned her stomach, but she didn't look away. She wrote, steady, precise. One calf after another. By mid-morning, sweat soaked through her collar. The noise was constant, bellowing cows, men shouting, iron hissing in the coals. Her wrist ached from writing, but her handwriting stayed neat. Then one calf fought harder than the rest. The rope slipped. The animal kicked wildly. Hold him. Luke shouted. Evelyn didn't think. She dropped the ledger and moved, gripping the calf's head, using her weight the way she'd learned with stubborn livestock back home. The calf bucked, nearly throwing her, but she held until Jonah finished the mark. "Let go," Jonah called. They released together. The calf bolted free. For a moment, no one spoke. Jonah looked at her. "I told you to stay back." "You needed help," she said, breathing hard. He studied her torn sleeve, the scrape on her arm, then nodded once. "Next time, wait for instruction." "Yes." But there was something new in his eyes. That afternoon, Jonah handed her the accounts. "Can you make sense of these?" Evelyn read quickly. Totals, losses, feed costs, patterns. "You're growing the herd," she said. "But winter losses last year were high. The north pasture's overused." Jonah blinked. "You saw that already?" "It's in the numbers." He sat beside her at the table, closer than before. "If you stay, this will be yours to manage with me." "I can do it." "I believe you." That night the wind rose. Clouds thickened. Jonah stood on the porch longer than usual, watching the sky. "Storm's coming," he said. "Hard one?" Evelyn joined him, the air heavy and electric. She felt it too, the land holding its breath. "What about the cattle?" she asked. "They're high," Jonah said. "We'll have to trust they ride it out." Thunder rolled in the distance. As Evelyn went to bed, unease settled deep in her bones. The trial wasn't just about work anymore. Something was coming, and it would test more than her strength. The storm arrived before dawn. Wind slammed into the house like a living thing, rattling windows and driving rain sideways. Evelyn was already awake, sitting up in bed, heart thudding as thunder cracked so close it felt personal. Jonah was at the door in seconds. "Get dressed," he said. "Warm clothes." "What about the cattle?" His jaw tightened. 20 head are first-time mothers. If they panic, they'll scatter. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Then we go." He looked at her hard. "It's dangerous. So is losing them." For a breath, she thought he might order her to stay. Instead, he turned and grabbed oilcloth slickers from the wall. "Stay close to me," he said. "No matter what." They rode into the storm. Rain lashed their faces. Wind fought the horses at every step. Lightning split the sky, turning the world white and hollow for a heartbeat at a time. Evelyn's hands went numb on the reins, but she kept Willow steady, following Jonah's dark shape through the chaos. They found the cattle scattered and wild-eyed, calves separated, cows running blind with fear. "We pushed them together," Jonah shouted. "Slow and steady." It was brutal work. Every flash of lightning sent the herd bolting. Every gain felt temporary. Evelyn's voice went raw from shouting. Her body shook with cold and strain, but she stayed upright, stayed moving. Then the thunder cracked like the world breaking. A bolt struck a tree nearby. Willow reared. Evelyn felt herself sliding, the reins tearing from her numb fingers. She hit the ground hard, breath knocked clean from her lungs. Pain exploded in her ankle. She tried to stand. Couldn't. Then Jonah was there, off his horse in one motion, lifting her without hesitation. "Don't move," he said, voice tight with fear she'd never heard before. He swung her up onto his saddle and mounted behind her, one arm locking around her waist. "Hold on," he commanded. "Don't let go." They rode down together through rain and darkness, Jonah guiding the horse with one hand, holding Evelyn with the other. She pressed back against him, pain and cold blurring into exhaustion. By the time they reached the lower pasture, the cattle had found shelter, alive, together. That was enough. Jonah carried Evelyn into the house without asking. Fire roared to life. Wet clothes were stripped away, replaced with blankets and warmth. His hand shook as he checked her ankle. "Bad sprain," he said. "Not broken." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I slowed you down." His head snapped up. "Don't." When he finally looked at her, the storm outside had nothing on the storm in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost you," he said hoarsely. "And nothing out there was worth that." The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable, and Evelyn knew the trial had ended, whether either of them was ready for that truth or not. The fire burned low and steady, casting soft light across the room. Evelyn sat wrapped in blankets, her ankle elevated, the pain dulled but present. Jonah moved quietly, stirring something warm on the stove, his broad shoulders tense as if the storm had followed him inside. "You should have told me to stop," she said finally. "I should have listened when you said you were strong enough," he replied without turning. "We both made choices." He brought her a mug and pressed it into her hands. Steam rose, sharp with whiskey and honey. She drank, warmth spreading through her chest. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, heavy. Jonah took a chair opposite her but didn't sit right away. He rested his hands on the table, fingers spread, as if bracing himself. "I asked for 2 weeks," he said. "Thought that would be enough time to be sure." Evelyn's heart tightened. "And are you?" He looked at her then. Really looked. "I was sure before the storm," he said quietly. "The storm just made it impossible to ignore." She swallowed. "Jonah, I don't want you staying because it's sensible," he continued. "Or because you think you owe me for giving you a chance. I don't want a wife who endures this life. I want one who chooses it." Evelyn met his gaze, steady despite the fear pulsing through her. "I chose it the moment I stayed." He nodded once as if confirming something deep and long held. "When I thought you were hurt out there," Jonah said, his voice roughening, "I realized I didn't care about the cattle, or the land, or the ranch. Not compared to you." Her breath caught. "I don't need more time," he said. "I don't want more time." He stood and crossed the room, stopping in front of her chair. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt. "Evelyn Moore," Jonah said, his voice low but unwavering. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Not because it's practical?" "Because it's necessary," he said, "to me." She laughed softly through the tears. "Yes." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years and pressed, his forehead to hers. "Careful, Reverend." "We'll do it properly," he said. "Soon, as soon as you can stand." "I'll stand," she promised. "I always do." 3 days later, with her ankle bound and her heart steady, Evelyn stood in the small church in Red Willow Valley. Mrs. Grant wept openly. Ben and Luke stood as witnesses, solemn and proud. Jonah slid a simple gold ring onto her finger. "I choose you," he said. And Evelyn knew without doubt that she had never been second choice at all. She had been the right one. Married life did not soften the land. It only demanded more of them. Evelyn learned that quickly. The mornings came early. The work never truly ended. Her ankle healed enough to walk, then to ride again. Though Jonah watched her closely, ready to step in even when she didn't ask. She pretended not to notice. He pretended not to hover. They settled into a rhythm. Evelyn took over the household and the accounts, bringing order where there had only been habit. She labeled shelves, tracked supplies, calculated feed against winter need. Jonah listened when she spoke, truly listened, and adjusted his plans without pride getting in the way. That mattered more than words. Evenings found them at the table together, ledgers open, lamplight pooling between them. Jonah explained grazing patterns and breeding decisions. Evelyn questioned costs and timing, quietly reshaping the future one number at a time. "You think differently," Jonah said one night watching her work. "So do you," she replied. "That's why this works." The isolation crept in slowly. Days passed where Evelyn spoke to no one but Jonah and the hired men. The silence of the valley pressed against her, heavier than the walls of the farmhouse she'd left behind. She didn't complain, but Jonah noticed. "Sunday," he said one evening, setting his cup down. "We'll go to town. You'll spend the afternoon with Mrs. Grant. We'll make it a habit." "You don't have to." "I want to." The small kindness settled deep in her chest. Summer burned hot and dry. The creek thinned. Jonah worried over the cattle, pacing the porch at dusk, staring at the sky as if daring it to change. "If the rain doesn't come," he said, "we'll have to move them early." "What about the springs north of the ridge?" Evelyn asked. "The ones on government land." He looked at her sharply. "You know about water claims?" "My grandfather taught me," she said. "If we document prior use, we might secure access." They worked late into the night, pulling old journals, mapping dates, drafting a claim. Jonah rode hard to file it, returned exhausted and triumphant. "They approved it," he said, gripping her hands. "You saved us." "No," Evelyn said. "We did." But not all battles were numbers in land. In town one afternoon she heard the whispers. Replacement. Plain sister. Trapped him with duty. The words followed her home like ghosts. That night she told Jonah everything. He didn't interrupt. Didn't soften the truth. "I chose you," he said firmly when she finished. "Every day. And I'd do it again even knowing everything I know now." The doubt loosened its grip. Outside, the land remained harsh and uncertain. Inside, something steady and unbreakable had taken root. Spring came fast and violent. Snowmelt swelled the creek until it roared like something alive, tearing at its banks and flooding the lower pasture. For 3 days, Evelyn and Jonah worked without pause, moving cattle to higher ground, boots heavy with mud, hands raw and aching. When the water finally receded, they stood together at the fence, soaked and exhausted. "We lost 2 calves," Jonah said quietly. "Could have been worse." "It was worse for others," Evelyn replied. "We moved early." He looked at her then, a long look filled with something close to awe. "You saved us again." Life pressed on. Then one afternoon, as Evelyn knelt in the garden pulling weeds, the sound of wheels reached her ears. Not a wagon. Something smoother, finer. She stood slowly. A polished carriage rolled up the drive, entirely out of place against dust and fence posts. Jonah emerged from the barn at the same moment, his body going still. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Golden hair pinned perfectly. Silk dress untouched by travel. Beauty sharpened by comfort and expectation. Lillian. Evelyn's heart dropped, then steadied. Behind her came a man in an expensive suit, his smile practiced and shallow. "Evelyn," Lillian said brightly, eyes sweeping the ranch with thinly veiled distaste. "So this is where you ended up." Jonah moved to Evelyn's side without a word. "Lillian," Evelyn replied evenly. "This is unexpected." "Oh, I'm sure." Lillian smiled, then turned to Jonah. "You must be." "Jonah Reed, I'm Lillian Moore, or rather, Mrs. Georg Daniel Cross. What now?" The man bowed slightly. "A pleasure." Courtesy demanded hospitality. Nothing more. Inside the house, Lillian's gaze catalogued everything. The simple furniture, the worn rugs, the lack of ornament. "How rustic," she murmured. Evelyn poured tea with steady hands. "Why are you here?" Lillian sighed dramatically. "Daniel's business ventures didn't work out as planned. We've fallen on hard times." Daniel stepped in smoothly. Temporarily, of course. Understanding settled cold and clear. "You want money," Evelyn said. "Only what's fair," Lillian replied, her sweetness hardening. "That contract was meant for me. You benefited from it. From my future." Jonah's arm settled around Evelyn's waist, firm and unmistakable. "She told me the truth the moment she arrived," he said calmly. "I chose her knowing everything." Lillian's smile cracked. "You married her out of duty." Jonah didn't raise his voice.
"No, I married her because she's my partner."
Silence fell like a blade. Lillian leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You took my life, Evelyn." Evelyn met her gaze without flinching. "You threw it away." The room held its breath. And Evelyn knew whatever came next would finally end the shadow. Her sister had cast her whole life. Lillian's eyes flashed. "You always were good at pretending you earned things," she said. "You stood quietly while I carried the weight of expectation. And now you're living the life that was meant for me." Evelyn felt the old sting rise and pass. "I didn't take anything from you," she said calmly. "I walked into something you abandoned." Daniel cleared his throat, smoothing his cuffs. "We're not here to argue. We came for help, alone. Enough to start over in San Francisco." "How much?" Jonah asked. $500 would—" "No," Jonah said. One word, final. Lillian's face hardened. "You'd turn away your own sister-in-law?" "I'd turn away manipulation," Jonah replied. "You arrived with threats and entitlement, not apology." Evelyn stepped forward. "You made your choice, Lillian. I made mine. I won't be shamed for building something real." The silence stretched. Finally, Lillian sagged, the fight draining from her. "We're broke," she whispered. "Completely." Evelyn's heart twisted despite everything. She looked at Jonah. He nodded once. "You'll have a meal and a place to sleep," he said. "And $50 to help you reach the coast." "That's it." Lillian stared at him, then at Evelyn. Pride warred with necessity. "We'll take it," she said quietly. That night passed stiffly. In the spare room, Lillian finally spoke without barbs. "You always were stronger," she said. "I hated that. Hated how you endured while I chased ease." "It's not too late to choose differently," Evelyn said. Lillian shook her head. "I'm married. I chose already." She paused at the door. "He loves you." "I see it now. That was never going to be me." By morning, the carriage rolled away. Evelyn watched until it vanished into dust. A chapter closing with more ache than anger. Work filled the days that followed, deliveries, records, planning, then the letter came official and heavy with promise. A trial contract, 50 head to be delivered by summer. Jonah read it twice. They want us. They want quality, Evelyn said. We can deliver that. They prepared meticulously. When the inspection came, the officer nodded. Impressed by the records, the health, the care. Accepted, he said. And we'll talk again. On the ride home, Jonah laughed, a sound still rare, still precious. We did it. We started it, Evelyn corrected. As dusk settled, they stood on the porch, the land breathing quietly around them. Success felt close enough to touch and fragile enough to break. Evelyn leaned into Jonah's shoulder. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Autumn settled gently over Enam Red Willow Valley, painting the land in gold and rust. The cattle were fat and calm. The creek ran steady again. The house stood warm against the coming cold. Evelyn moved through her days with quiet confidence. She knew where everything belonged now, every ledger, every tool, every task. She no longer questioned her place. The land answered her in small ways. A fence that held, a meal that satisfied, numbers that balanced. One evening, as the sun slid behind the hills, Jonah came up the path with a folded paper in his hand. They're expanding the rail line, he said, unable to keep the smile from his voice. Loading yards within 5 miles by next spring. Evelyn understood instantly. Easier transport. Better prices, stability. We'll have options, she said softly. Because of you, Jonah replied. She shook her head. Because of us. They sat on the porch as dusk deepened. The quiet filled with familiar sounds, the low murmur of cattle, the wind moving through grass, the creak of wood cooling after a warm day. Jonah pulled out his old ranch journal and opened it to a blank page. Write today's date, he said. She did. Now write this, he added. Evelyn wrote slowly, carefully, the words settling into the page like truth finally given a home. Today we stopped surviving and began to thrive. Today we chose partnership over fear and honesty over comfort. Today we chose each other again. Jonah took the pen and wrote beneath her words. She arrived as a replacement sent in place of another. But there was nothing to replace. She was always the right one. Strong, honest, unafraid to tell the truth even when it cost her everything. She is my partner. She is my home. Evelyn read the words through quiet tears. I love you, she said. Jonah turned to her, his expression open in a way it had never been before. I loved you from the moment you chose to stay. I just didn't know how to name it yet. The stars appeared one by one, bright and steady above them. Evelyn thought of the frightened woman who had stepped off a stagecoach, believing usefulness was all she deserved. That woman felt distant now. Not gone, but grown. She hadn't been chosen because she was convenient. She hadn't been kept out of obligation. She had been seen. She had found belonging. As the first cold breath of winter moved through the valley, Evelyn rested her head against Jonah's shoulder, certain of one thing above all else. She was exactly where she was meant to be. If this tale stirred your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales from the Frontier, where history rides the frontier, courage is tested, and love refuses to die. Until the next tale. Right on, partner.